Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading in the one-year Bible. This week we're focusing on Sunday's sermon topic of parenting. I'm Stephen Mizell, and I'm joined by Wendy, Korbusieski, and Rexroad. And so the text comes from John 21, verses 15 through 19. And I'm going to just read some phrases in here before we jump in. Jesus is talking to Peter, and he says, "Do you love me more than these?" Then he says, "Then feed my lambs." Then he asks him again, "Do you love me?" Peter's response is always yes. He says, "Take care of my sheep." Then he asks him again, "Do you love me?" And Peter is hurt by this question, and he says, "Then feed my sheep." So our theme for this week focuses on parenting, but this passage we have read does not seem like it is directly address parenting, Chris. So, but I think it relates to parenting. So, what's exactly taking place in John 21?
Well, this is taking place after the crucifixion and after the resurrection of Jesus. Peter and a couple of the other disciples, they decided to go out fishing, which is Peter's previous career, and a couple of the other disciples. And when they were fishing through the night, they caught nothing. But in the morning, Jesus appeared on the shore, and tells them to just cast their net on the other side of the boat, which I think is funny. And they actually brought in a huge catch, and that's when Peter realized that it's Jesus up on the shore. He jumps out of the boat and swims to Jesus. Jesus had breakfast ready for them, and the fish was cooking at the campfire. And after they had breakfast, this conversation between Jesus and Peter took place.
You know, we've pointed out that the fact that Jesus has asked Peter 3 times, if he loved him, and the specific words were, "Do you love me more than these?" And so the scholars are convinced that Jesus was referring back to the conversation that they had pre-crucifixion or, pre-trial and arrest, where, Peter was telling him, "Jesus, I love you more than these other guys do, more than the other disciples love you." Mm-hmm. And Jesus was like, "Hey, buddy, let me tell you something. The truth is, you're going to deny me. Mm-hmm. Before this is all over, you're actually going to deny me 3 times. Mm-hmm. And in fact, what happened in the story as it played out is during that trial and arrest, Peter, in fact, did deny him 3 times. Mm-hmm. And so now Jesus is asking Peter if he truly loves him more than these disciples do. And he actually asks him 3 times, just like Peter denied him 3 times.
Yeah. I noticed after Peter answered Jesus' question 3 times, Jesus gave Peter instructions to feed or tend to the sheep. He's essentially calling Peter to be a leader among believers, right? To whom Jesus is referring to as sheep. And that's a whole different context or conversation. But our focus is on parenting, which is a type of leadership. So I think we can draw some parenting lessons out of this connection between loving Jesus and leading sheep.
Well, I think there is a comparison that we can make between pastoring and parenting. But my question really hits there between that connection between loving and feeding in that conversation that they had there. So is Jesus saying that there's a qualification for feeding his sheep, that you have to love Jesus, or is he saying that feeding the sheep is an expression of the fact that you love Jesus?
I definitely believe that the parents' love for Jesus is expressed in the way that they lead and they parent their children. I mean, everyday acts of care and discipline, guidance, and are genuinely fueled by love. And while parents who are non-believers may also love their children, the more love a parent has for Jesus, the more the parent is able to express that love to their child.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, Peter's love for Jesus was kind of like that foundation for his love and care for other people. And true leadership for our children has to be founded in our relationship for Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like you said, like parents of non-believers, they love their kids. and they're loving their children. But a parent who's in a relationship with Jesus is leading their kid from a different mindset, from a different mission mind. Their mission is not only to raise their kid, but to raise their kid in a relationship with Jesus, and to spend eternity with him. They've got a goal, and that goal requires a relationship with Jesus.
I would agree. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's kind of a both and situation. Love is both a qualification for leading, but it's also an expression of your love for Jesus. And the two elements kind of create a cycle, if you will. The more you love, the better you lead. The more you lead, the more in love with Jesus you have to be. It's true for pastors. I think it's also true for parents. So do you think love is a prerequisite for being a good parent, or is it something that grows through the act of parenting?
Immediately, I thought about the 1 Corinthians passage in 13 that reminds us that, if I have love, if I have not love, I am nothing. It kind of stuck there for me, kind of landed there for me. But then I also thought about a story my mom told me about when I was first born. When she brought me home from the hospital, she was scared to death of me, and she didn't want to touch me. She didn't want to have anything to do with me. And she had this kind of detachment. And it was not until my grandmother forced her to give me my first bath that that love kind of kicked in. So it was like it wasn't immediate. So I don't want anybody out there who had those initial feelings of that kind of parenting experience to think, oh my gosh, I'm a bad parent because I didn't feel that immediate love for my child, because that kind of is a real thing, kind of like a chemical thing, I think, almost, that can happen with parents. But I think that it's a natural thing, that it kicks in, that good parenting and loving their kids it goes hand in glove. It is going to kick in. That immediately, it is going to kick in.
There's a couple of things I would say about that. One, I think it's more stereotypical for men to have that response, not the natural nurturing. But I also think some of it is personality driven. And I think one of my response to this question is, I don't think you should have a child unless you're going to love the child.
Right.
That's prerequisite, number one.
Yeah.
But I think the act of parenting creates love for that child. So it's a both and, right? I also think some of it is personality driven. And I think one of the traps that we fall into is that we are intimidated at times that we don't express love the way other people do, right? I see people and they are so nurturing, right? They're so caring. They'll do whatever I'll fix you a drink, I'll fix you a sandwich, I'll clean your room, I'll do whatever. And there are other people who have none of that, right? It's not that they don't love them. It's just like that is not their gift.
Right.
Now, I think often both of them are necessary. I just think, Gary Chapman would call it a love language.
Right, how you love.
How you love and how you receive love. But also some of it is, I read an interesting book recently by Henry Cloud in preparation for a sermon I wanted to do in the fall, sermon series on trust. And he says, and I think love is like similar to this, but he says trust is not explicit. He says you can trust somebody here to do this, but not trust them to do this, right? Because they're not gifted, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the understanding, the knowledge, or the concern. But over here, they're masterful, and it's okay to say I trust you here, but I don't trust you here. And I think we see love expressed out that way, because we think, well, you don't love them because you don't respond the way this person responds. But that may not be true, right? Your love may be expressed when they're in danger and you have the ability to protect, that's different. I don't know. You have any thoughts on this, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, love is definitely a driving force to being a great parent. And we talked about it a little bit before, that the love that we get from Jesus really helps us impact their eternal future. Not only that, their earthly one, but their eternal future. The struggle that some parents have that don't have Jesus is they're only able to really teach them things of this world, and I don't think the love is as rich. But what you were saying before, people express it in different ways. Something that's a struggle for some parents is the ones that are like super nurturing, to start pulling that back some as the kids get older, to make sure that they're starting to take care of themselves and do stuff, because otherwise you end up with a 25-year-old that you're cleaning their room.
Yeah, well, we went. I mean, there's lots of language for that. We went from helicopter parents, which was my generation of kids, to today they call them bulldozer parents, where they don't just hover them now; they just go clear the way for them, so they got a clear path, to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And they believe they're loving. Sometimes they're doing damage, but they're loving out of their, gift set, I think. So, have you ever found that the act of serving others deepens your love for them? How does that work in parenting?
Think back at Jesus and, him washing disciples' feet, and he was teaching that serving others is kind of central to that leadership. And I think that translates to parenting very clearly, that servant role, being humble and serving, forges that love. And it just translates into that parenting position very, very easily. I think it's a really good picture of that.
I mean, whenever you see like a mission group go out, or a group of people go and serve in the community, there's a natural bond that happens between them and between them and the people they're serving. And I think the same thing's true within your family. When you go and you serve with your kids, or they see you serving, they're able to kind of understand a little bit more about what life's about. And what life's about is not focusing just on myself, but caring for other people. And that's just a good mindset to instill in them.
My observation, maybe this is just my own personal problem, but I doubt it. My experience is serving other people deepens my spiritual relationship with Jesus. Almost always, without fail. It does not always deepen my relationship with people. As a matter of fact, sometimes it ticks me off, right? Because they're unappreciative,
Oh, yeah.
They're snarky, they're entitled, they feel like they're doing you a favor, and that rubs me the wrong way. Now, if they're appreciative, genuinely appreciative, I think that opens the door for relationship. But the reason why it always deepens my relationship, because sometimes I serve people and I have to go pray, right?
Right.
Because it wasn't easy, right? It's not easy serving people. But my obligation, though, isn't, and I mean, parenting is that way. I mean, there are probably no less or more entitled people on the planet than children.
Yeah, you do things for them and they don't appreciate it because it's not about
don't even understand
them or you.
Right? They think you owe it to them, right? It can be discouraging. It can be stressful. So I don't. In a parenting relationship, maybe it deepens the relationship every time, maybe. But I think you're certainly sowing seeds,
Right. And it may not be immediate.
Right.
Right. It just like discipline.
But I struggle when you feel like I owe you something.
Or you got taken advantage of.
I hate to go. Yeah. Well, I think it's just more the entitlement thing probably eats me. I hate to go to a fast food restaurant and they feel like they're doing me a favor to be on the job that day.
Yep.
I mean, I'm like, here, I'm paying $400 for a quarter pounder, and you act like you've done me a favor to show up.
You pull up to the window and they're still sitting there texting on their phone. Yeah. They're just kind of like, I'll be with you in a minute.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of stuff, the entitlement, it eats me at times, but it deepens my relationship with Jesus because what it requires me to do in order for me to respond properly and I have the right attitude.
Depend on him.
10 minutes later is I've got to go pray about it.
Mm-hmm.
And because if I don't, somebody else is going to bear the brunt of it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's unfair to them.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around our daily Bible reading from the One Year Bible.